Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Dux-Soup webinar. In this webinar, Giles Garnett, the head of professional services, will discuss how to scale your LinkedIn lead generation with LinkedIn's 100 connection per week limit. Live chat is being monitored by me, the head of customer support, Jin, and at the end of the webinar, we will have a live Q&A with Giles. Thank you for joining us today, and let's start our webinar.
Thank you, Jin. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone joining today's Dux-Soup webinar. As always, we have a mixture of long-term users and relatively new users today. So firstly, to introduce myself to anyone who is new to Dux-Soup, my name is Giles Garnett and I'm Head of Professional Services here at Dux-Soup. I present the webinars for Dux-Soup, and if you require additional support or consultancy through Dux-Soup booster calls or tech support calls, then I'm responsible for running those. So today we are going to talk about a subject which has become somewhat of a hot topic regarding LinkedIn lead generation activities. We will talk about the 100 connection requests per week limit and what that means to you as a LinkedIn and Dux-Soup user. This is a fairly general topic insofar as it's applicable to all Dux-Soup users, so I'm not going to be talking about specific pro or turbo features today. As always, while I'm presenting and talking, Jin will be doing her very best to answer your questions on the web chat, so try and keep those questions on topic so they may be useful for the whole of the audience. Other questions regarding Dux-Soup, etc., can be raised via the Dux-Soup support pages, and any questions that are appropriate we'll be covering at the end of the webinar during the Q&A. Also remember, as always, this session is being recorded and will be made available to everyone who has registered via an email, and in the coming days this will also be added to our website and YouTube channel. As usual, this will also be a mix of both slides and a bit of live demo, so hopefully useful information for everyone. This is the agenda for today. We'll do a very quick what is Dux-Soup for anybody who's new to the product, what LinkedIn limits we're talking about, and the strategies that we advise or that we have seen people using regarding this. So, what is Dux-Soup? Dux-Soup is a Chrome extension. It's also compatible with other Chrome-based browsers, which you can use to mimic human behavior on the LinkedIn platform. And that's both free LinkedIn accounts and Sales Navigator, and indeed Recruiter Lite. If you select basically the list of people you want Dux-Soup to process, and then you get Dux-Soup to run your chosen activities against that list. Dux-Soup is built to mimic the human behavior in order to keep your account in order to keep your LinkedIn account safe. So from that point of view, this is very, very important. Very quick touch on the different features of Dux-Soup. So with Pro, you can automate your LinkedIn lead gen activities. You can auto invite with personalized messages, search, filter, and target using the tags, and auto message first degree connections and download your data, as well as also using the in-mail functions as well. With Turbo, you can also then schedule automatic follow-up messages and campaigns. You have funnel stats tracking. You can connect to your CRM. We have direct integration with HubSpot and Pipedrive, and then we can integrate with other systems via Zapier and Integromat using webhooks. We also then have the Dux Dash for further monitoring. But as I say, we're not going to get too hung up on product features today. We're going to look more at the LinkedIn limits. So what LinkedIn limits? Now, first of all, I need to point something out. There is no magic bullet for getting around these limits. What we have to understand is, why are these limits in place? And therefore, what can we do to maximize our activities within the boundaries that have now been set by LinkedIn? I don't have a solution for you that will unlock the ability for you to send thousands of connection requests as you may have done in the past. You now have to consider other strategies and approaches, which, if done correctly, can make your lead generation activities even more efficient and effective. So basically, earlier this year, during Q1, LinkedIn started introducing a limit to the number of connection requests that users can send in a week. We saw for the first indications in sort of March, April time, and users saw the notification in the bottom right-hand corner on their screen. This is nothing to worry about and has nothing to do with your use of Dux-Soup, and indeed is something that none of us can control. This is LinkedIn placing limitations on the use of its tool. It does not matter if you have a paid LinkedIn account or a free LinkedIn account. This limitation has been gradually rolled out to the vast majority of LinkedIn users. I've spoken to a very, very small number of people who've not yet seen this, but the vast majority have this limitation. Something to note, Dux-Soup's ability to scale your lead generation is not effective. It's not a warning or a restriction that's going to lead to a LinkedIn account ban. LinkedIn is basically finding ways to protect its users from spam and to uphold what they see as the integrity of their business-to-business social networking platform. So taking all of this into consideration, what do you need to think about in order to continue to maximize the potential of the LinkedIn environment? Well, you need to think about what your strategy is. No longer can you just have the scattergun approach of inviting thousands of people per month and hope that you'll hit some targets. You now need to think much more about quality over quantity. Spend more time refining your searches and creating lists of targets. In a few weeks, we're going to be presenting a webinar on search criteria and LinkedIn lists, so keep an eye out for that. But we do have blog posts relating to those topics on our web pages already. And when they were written a year or 18 months ago, they're just as applicable now as they were then. With Dux-Soup, you don't just have to send invites. You can visit many, many profiles per day on LinkedIn and use Dux-Soup to gather data about those people, so auto-visiting lots and lots of profiles. You can follow them and tag them using Dux-Soup. And every time you visit a profile, that person will get a virtual tap on the shoulder, i.e. a notification that you visited them, and that can also stimulate a reaction from those targets. Now, if you have Dux-Soup points, you can also get Dux-Soup to look for an email address for the person you visited. That's for non-first degree connections, so second and third degree connections. And if it's successful, then you can use that put that into your contacts and invite those people via LinkedIn, via the import contacts facility within LinkedIn. People have been able to do this, to use this facility to send more than 100 connections per week. If you want to gather data, very high level data very quickly, you can use Dux-Soup to scan lists in LinkedIn and then create your own lists of people that you want to revisit. And this can be a really effective way of narrowing down your targets. You can still, of course, send first degree messages, i.e. messages to your existing network. A lot of the people I speak to have vast first degree networks, so thousands of connections, the majority of which remain relatively dormant. So you can make use of this first degree messaging feature, or indeed the campaign feature if you've got Turbo, to try to stimulate your network. My tip here would be to ensure that you tag people as you message them so that you can categorize them and know who you've already reached out to. If you've got a paid LinkedIn account, so Sales Navigator, you can also use Dux-Soup for sending in-mails, and that's a really powerful way to reach out to prospects. Just keep an eye on the credits because you get so many credits a month depending on the level of accounts that you have. The most important thing to consider here is to have a clear, repeatable process that is reliable. And I'm seeing more and more Dux-Soup users plan their weeks in such a way that they have control over their activity. They don't just set it off at the beginning of the week and forget about it. They will send connection requests on perhaps 1, maybe 2 days per week. And that'll be a focused activity on maybe a Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday. The rest of the week, they're then using Dux-Soup to do all of the other things that I'm talking about here, such as just visiting profiles, collecting data, or messaging first degree connections. So what I'd like to do now is just walk through some of those things that I've talked about. How to set up Dux-Soup to just visit profiles or to follow profiles, how to collect emails, and then what to do next, how to scan a list, and then how to download data, be that visit data or scan data. And then from that visit data or scan data, you create a custom list. And then we'll talk briefly about tagging, retargeting, And then also just touch on the planner and throttling, because that's how you can control the activity of the robot, making sure that it's only running at the times that you want. Okay, so let's flick to LinkedIn. For anyone who's not been on these before, this is me, this is my LinkedIn page. If you wish to send me a connection request, feel free to. Always happy to be connected with Dux-Soup users or people with an interest in this technology. Send me a connection request, put a message on it, because it's always nice to know where people have found my profile from. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Quite happy to engage with people via LinkedIn. So first of all, I need to think about the list we had. Let me have a look. So how to just visit profiles. Oh, we'll go back here. And what we'll do first of all, we'll just carry out a very brief search. Now remember, you can do this in both standard LinkedIn and in Sales Navigator. So what I've got here is a very simple search. I've just put a search for IT consultant. What I'll do is I'll just narrow it down a little bit to where I am. A couple of things just to remind people when you're using Dux-Soup, when you're using LinkedIn. When you carry out a search in standard LinkedIn, you only get to see the first 1,000 results of a search. You only get the first 100 pages. So that's something to remember. Right, so in order to just carry out visits to these profiles, what I would do is I wait for my Dux-Soup icon to turn green, and then I would click up here and I go to my Dux-Soup options. And then here within the options, I would make sure that I've got everything turned off here. And then check that I've got all of that turned up. I'm not going to carry out any automated actions. What I'll do is, just because I'm demoing, I'm going to speed the robot up a little bit here so that we actually get some data fairly quickly. Bear with me 1 second. So there we go. That's that done. So we've got the speeds. There we go. And now I go back to my list, and all I do now is, if I want to carry out auto visits to these profiles, I would click up here and press the visit profiles. Now, one of the things that I talked about was how you can collect emails, and you can see here, would you like Dux-Soup to look for email addresses other than your first degree connections? If I was to press yes please here, then I would need to have purchased Dux-Soup points in order for Dux-Soup to look for those email addresses. Now you can purchase Dux-Soup points by clicking on the Dux-Soup icon and going down to the Dux dash here. And then over in the bottom here under the Dux store here, you can here see how to purchase the Dux-Soup points. And there's various bits of information here. And also, if you look at our support pages, there is additional information around that on there. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit because it's quite small on my screen. There we go. Or maybe that's just my age and my eyesight. Right, so anyway, that was how to collect email addresses of non-first degree connections. So sorry. If we go back to visit profiles and we now say, yep, I'm not going to carry out anything here other than just to visit these people, I would now press OK. And now Dux-Soup will start visiting all of these people in turn. It'll reload the page and it'll carry out those auto visits for me now. And I could just leave that to run in the background and carry on with my day's work. Now, with Dux-Soup, you can visit a lot of profiles in a day. And if we just have a look at our options here and we look at our throttling tab here, you can see here that if you've got, for example, Sales Navigator account, you can visit up to 500 profiles a day. But there are different levels that I would advise you go to. Maxing out at 500 every day, that's probably pushing it. But you do have that possibility to visit a significant number of profiles a day if you've got a Sales Navigator account. Even if you've got a free LinkedIn account, up to 100 a day, that's still a significant number every day if you're running it 7 days a week. So what I could do now is just leave Dux-Soup to gather information about these people. And what you'll notice here is that the little counter in the top right will go up as it gathers data about each of these people as it visits. And as I said earlier, if I was collecting the email addresses as well, I would then also be able to see the email addresses if it was successfully finding an email address associated with that LinkedIn account. And what you can do if you've then found an email address associated with a LinkedIn account, well, I'll just show you. I'll just open a new LinkedIn page while that's running there in the background. what I've done before with people and shown them how to do that is you can then basically, where do we go to? We go to, I think it's my network. And then we go over here, so add personal contacts. So what you can then do is, for example, upload all of those email addresses into your contact database within your environment. So for example, here in your Google Contacts or whatever, you could then, if you've downloaded a bunch of email addresses, click on the import button, and then you can say, right, I will import my CSV file that I created earlier. That's a CSV file that contains some email addresses that I've managed to download. I can open that, import that. I can then import, maybe that's going to work. There we go. I could import that bunch of emails, and then I could then use that to, if I press the continue button, then I would then be able to import those people into LinkedIn that way. It's an extra way to be able to reach out to more people as you find email addresses, and that can be a useful way if you're constantly maxing out at 100 connection requests per week, that you can then reach out to speak to more people, hopefully. So as you can see here, Dux-Soup's been ticking away, visiting a few profiles here and there. We're up to 31 now, we were at 26 earlier. I'm just going to stop the robot there a second. Now what I'm also going to show you is how to scan a list. Now scanning is much faster, of course, but you don't get as much data. So if I now scan this list rather than visiting these profiles, if I, instead of going to the visit button, I go to the scan button, again, Dux-Soup will reload the page and it'll do this relatively quickly. It'll basically take a snapshot of the data we're seeing on screen here. We'll let that run through a couple of pages, and then I can show you the difference between the data and then what you can do with that data. So you can see there the count has just gone up very quickly to 41. We'll just let it grab another page a second before we move on to show you how to download that data and what that data looks like when you've downloaded it, and the difference then between visit data and scan data. So a lot of people will, for example, visit several hundred profiles over the first half of the week, gather all that information, and then they'll maybe have a look through that spreadsheet and say, right, I only want to invite the top 100 people. I'm going to stop the robot there. Top 100 people and send them invitations, because they then can filter out people who work in certain locations, people who work at certain organizations. And of course, the search criteria within LinkedIn help you narrow that down as well. But there's also that extra level then of checking. You've got maybe 500 or 600 lines of data to go through, and you want to just pick out the top 100 to focus your efforts upon. So if I now go up here to the top, and I can see here I've got the download data button. We'll start with our visit data. So this is from visiting profiles. This is the data that we'll get. If I click on that one, that creates me my CSV file here. And what you can see here is a bunch of people that I visited. And you can see here the timestamps when I visited. So the ones from line 27 down are from today. So you can see that there. Previous ones are from previous visits and testing that I've done and demonstrations that I've been doing. So you can see here the sort of information that you get. You get different information depending on the list that you're running on. Now I'm running this here on standard LinkedIn. If I was to visit profiles in Sales Navigator, I would also get their Sales Navigator URL. But the important information you get here is this one here, the profile URL. That's the URL there. And then you also, if it's available, you also get an email address of the people that you are visiting. Now, of course, you don't always get an email address. It depends on the security settings of that individual, and also if there's an email address associated with that account, if you've purchased Dux-Soup points. So that's different amounts of data there. What's very usually, the things that are usually interesting are the job title here. That's a very interesting one. And also the summary. So that's the tagline that people have against their profiles. Of course, you've got the company as well. But what you can do then is if you've got, for example, 600, 700, 800 lines of data here, you can then sort them and then play around with them and then decide to create effectively a custom list. So you can then target the people that you really want to target. So say, for example, I've now created say I've got a list of several hundred profiles here and I want to only invite the top 20. So I'm going to discard this bottom section here. We'll delete that lot there. So say this was just the group of people that I want to target with my invites. It's not particularly relevant because I've got a mixture of different first, second, and third degree connections here. What I do is then make sure that I've saved this as a CSV file. There we go. We've saved that as a CSV file. And now what I can do with this here is I can now re-upload this into Dux-Soup and run my outreach activity against this list. So if I close this one here, we'll go back to our Dux-Soup icon. Here on the left-hand side near the bottom, we have the revisit data button. And here I can now upload my file. There we are, it's that one that I called demo. I'll open that one and we see here we've now got 20 lines, yeah, it was the 20 lines, so it's 19 people here. I can now run my chosen activities with Dux-Soup against this list. Now I would then probably say, yeah, I'd like to send connection requests to these people. And then I can say, right, I have absolute control over how many connection requests I'm sending out per day because I've only uploaded however many people were in my CSV file. And we can do that from our visit data. We can do exactly the same from our scan data. So if I go back to my download data button again here in the top right, and now I look at my scan data here, we'll just download that one. And we'll see here we get much less data here. We do get some data. And again, if you scan the list out of Sales Navigator, you get different amounts of data. But here you basically get, yeah, time that you scanned them, the URL, first name, last name, job title, and location. Say, sometimes it's interesting to scan different lists from different places because you do get different information. But again, if I wanted to just maybe reach out to the top dozen people here, I would then edit my file accordingly. And then let's just save that again so that I don't overwrite what I've already got. There we go, we'll save that one. And now once again, we can now upload this. There's enough data in here. I've got the first name, the last name, and the profile URL. Those are the important ones that we need in order to be able to get Dux-Soup to carry out our revisit. Now there are further options that you can use when you're doing revisits. You can see here, there's enough information there to be able to run Dux-Soup. And in a second, you'll notice the Dux-Soup icon will turn green and say, at your service, I can now run my Dux-Soup automation from here. And that would be, for example, to send my connection requests after I've filtered my list. As you go and visit all of these profiles as well, you can also tag profiles. So if I go back to my Dux-Soup options, so whenever you visit a profile, you can also tag them with your own custom tags. And that's a very useful way, for example. So say, for example, I wanted to visit everybody on my IT consultant list here who's based, let's narrow this down a little bit more. There we go. Let's narrow it down so it's a slightly smaller list than 180,000. Oh, it's still 17,000. Oh, well. So say I wanted to visit everybody on this list and I wanted to label them all as IT consultants. I could carry out those visits and I would put in here my IT consultant tag. All of those people would get that Dux-Soup tag against them as I visit them. And then I can use Dux-Soup to maybe revisit those people. And it can be quite useful to do that. So you can have a strategy, for example, to visit a group of people 1 week and then leave it for a week or two and then revisit them again. And the reason for that is because people will see your name popping up again and again and again. As I said earlier, this here, people, that tap on the shoulder, who's viewed your profile. A lot of people will keep an eye on this. They get a notification every time somebody visits your profile. So it's a really important and a really useful thing to do, to keep visiting profiles. Even if you can't invite people, visit profiles, visit profiles, visit profiles. And if your profile is good, is looking good and it's up to date, you've got good pertinent information on your page, because this basically you're trying to get them to click on that link to look at your page. Hopefully they will then engage with you by some way or another. So that's, you know, an absolute must do, is to visit as many profiles as possible. Every activity you carry out within the LinkedIn environment, your followers get a notification about that, or will potentially get a notification about that, depending on their security settings, of course. So if you like a post, if you comment on a post, if you visit people, if you connect with people, all of those activities get registered in the LinkedIn environment, and it generates more potential for people to see your activity. The more people see you, the more likely they are to want to engage with you as well, as making sure as your profile is up to date. So tagging, we talked about tagging just then. Once you've tagged the profiles, you can then actually carry out this search by tag. So Dux-Soup tags, you can click here. I've got a whole bunch from testing and demoing I've done over the years. But if I, for example, want to look out for people everybody who I've tagged with London, I can then see all of these 42 people here have tagged with London, and I can now run Dux-Soup from this page again. There's enough information on this page for me to run Dux-Soup from here. So you can categorize the people as you visit them under certain labels, tags if you like, and then go around again and visit them again, It's that constant engage, that constant sort of little tap on the shoulder that people will respond to. The other things that we can talk about here, I mentioned earlier that you don't have to connect with people all the time. If you're using standard LinkedIn, you can get Dux-Soup to automatically follow people. You visit them and then you follow them, and then you will see updates about those people, about their activities on LinkedIn. So that's something to consider as well. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier was making sure you reach out to your first degree connections. And you can see here, the third option down, send a personalized message to first degree connections. You can use standard LinkedIn or Sales Navigator for this. And because these people are first degree connections, you can send them an extensive message up to 3,000 characters. So if we're just for a change, let's go to Sales Navigator here. So if I wanted to send out a message to my first degree connections, what I could do here is I would go to my my lead filters, and I would go to my first degree connections here. Within here, I now have a complete list of all my first degree connections on the screen. And what I may want to do then is maybe narrow that down by geography. So I only maybe want to reach out to the people who are based maybe locally to me, and that would be a way to do that. So these people are based locally to where I am, and I could now run Dux-Soup against this list here. If I go to my options, I could say, right, I can now send a message to all of those people using the usual format of constructing a message, the hi_FN_ in order to be able to pull out their first name and send out my outreach message to them here. What I would also do then is I would tag those people with some sort of an indicator so I know what message I'd sent them, because I want to make sure I minimize the risk of sending the same message out to the same group of people again and again and again. So I would then tag those people with my message here, and then what I would do is, under my skipping rules, make sure that I skip anybody who I'd previously tagged with that tag so I don't duplicate my activities. But using the outreach of first degree messaging is so important, and it's such an underused facility. There's people I speak to regularly who've got in excess of 5,000 first degree connections, and it's basically probably 80% dormant. It's such a useful thing to stimulate your network, to nurture it, to make sure that it's actually working for you. There could be many first degree connections that you've spent time building up over the years, who maybe you've just forgotten about and they've forgotten about you. You're just sort of hanging around in the background. So engaging with them is a really important and powerful thing to do. Finally, I'd like to talk about the throttling. So I always recommend, when you're running Dux-Soup, to run it either at the random speed or the slowest speed. Especially with the new limits, there's absolutely no point in doing this at great speed. You might as well run it slowly and as safe as possible, especially if you're sending out connection requests. So make sure that you're running the robot at a relatively slow speed, and use the planner to plan your activities, to plan your days, so that when you're sending out connection requests, you're not also using Dux-Soup manually at the same time. It's something I mentioned quite a lot on my webinars. If you're doing stuff manually on LinkedIn, and you're sending out connection requests at the same time using Dux-Soup, LinkedIn may see that as multiple people having access to your account, and they may just log you out. Because that's against LinkedIn's terms and conditions to have multiple people accessing your account at the same time. It's supposed to be one user per account. So my advice is always to plan your days and have a clear times as to when you're running automation activities and when you're manually using LinkedIn. So if I just go back to the slides a second, and we just go back to the LinkedIn limits. There we go. So the thing to remember is that this is nothing to do with you using Dux-Soup or any other form of automation. This is purely LinkedIn wanting to protect their reputation with regards their business-to-business social networking platform. You can still use Dux-Soup for many, many activities other than just sending connection requests. Of course, that's the main people think about, grow my network. But there's so many more possibilities out there to be able to engage with people via direct messaging, via in-mails perhaps, which we've not talked about a lot, but that's something that a lot of people do as well. By becoming a member of groups, you could, for example, visit everybody who's a member of a group. If you've got Sales Navigator, you can search within Sales Navigator. Let's just close that a second and go to the all filters. If, for example, you have a particular area of expertise and you want to see all the people in that group, you can go to that group here. Let's just go for IT Specialist Network. There we are. I'm not a member of this group, but because I've got Sales Navigator, I can see that there's 210,000 people in that particular discussion group. And what I can do here is I can now run Dux-Soup against this list. So I could now maybe narrow this down geographically. Maybe I'll just look at people in England. There we go. And I could now, for example, run Dux-Soup against this list, visit all of these people, get information about them, and then plan my ways forward from there. It's about gathering information, making more informed decisions, and better targeting is how you will become more successful. We had a guest speaker a month or so ago, a guy called Tyron, who talks about very much targeting the people who are interesting, not using the scattergun approach. And what a lot of people I'm speaking to are finding is actually having these limits in place is actually making their LinkedIn activity more targeted, more focused, and actually far more rewarding because they're putting a little bit more thought into it and they're getting a better return for the time that they're investing. So that's what I'm seeing from the front line, from the people I'm engaging with on a regular basis via the booster and the technical calls. So that's something to consider as well. Okay, I've probably talked for long enough. Just to emphasize, that is the incorrect date I've just spotted. So in 2 weeks' time, on the 17th of August, we're going to be talking about the remote control features of Dux-Soup Turbo. My bad for doing the slide and not updating it. So yeah, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be looking at the remote control features of Dux-Soup Turbo. There's some new features there been released relatively recently. If you require assistance with your Dux-Soup setup, then we run booster and technical calls. Booster calls are really for setting you up and getting you going. The technical calls are more focusing along the technical lines, such as using webhooks and those sorts of things with Integromat or Zapier, for example. So you can book those via the website. These are our links, usual links, which I'll put on the page in a second after I've got to the next one. One of the most useful ones, which I think people maybe forget about sometimes, is the penultimate one here, the feedback.duxsoup.com. That's our suggestions page. So that's where users can go to put in their own feature requests. There's quite a number in there already, so have a look through, have a look at the list, and see if the features that you want are on there, and you can upvote your requested features or indeed suggest new ones. We review those on a regular basis, and we really appreciate your feedback as users to help us drive and build the product going forward. After all that, we'll now go over to Jin, see if there's any questions.
Yeah, Hello, and thank you for the webinar. So I have a couple of questions.
Yep.
One user was asking, so adding contacts via email does not count towards the 100 connections per week limit, or did I misunderstand?
No, that's correct. So if you've got your 100 connections per week limit and you've reached that target, you can still add people via email, via your contacts.
Thank you. Another question. Are there any Sales Navigator filters you think have become more useful since the 100 connection request limit?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's have a think. More useful. Nah, I mean, I'll be touching this when we do the searching and filtering one a webinar in the next few weeks. The things that I make use of most of all when I'm using Sales Navigator is sometimes I use these to make these options here to remove views that no, I can't speak now. Apologies. Remove viewed leads from your search, so people I've already viewed before who I maybe don't want to view again, or maybe remove people I've contacted before. Those are very useful functions there. I think some of the most useful things here that I find within Sales Navigator filters is the ability to be able to explicitly exclude groups of people. So for example, if I wanted to specifically exclude owners, I can exclude them by using that button there, something that a lot of people aren't aware of. I know a lot of you are, of course, but you can specifically exclude certain groups of people from your search, and that can be a really useful way to narrow down things. So say, for example, you were wanting to, okay, you were within, I can't remember, I think this is just a group search. So maybe I'm not interested in anybody who's unpaid. I'm not interested in anybody who's on at an entry level. Or in training, and I'm only interested in those sort of owners, partners, those sorts of things. You know, that way you can specifically exclude certain seniority levels. I think it works in some of these, but not in all of them. Let's have a look. Yeah, you can specifically exclude within function, but you can't within the year's experiences. There are other ones as well, but the ability to specifically exclude people from your search, I find the most useful thing within Sales Navigator, and that's just generally, not specifically within the 100 limit. But of course, the more you can narrow things down, the better.
Thank
okay.
you. At the moment, I do not have any more questions.
Okay, well, just conscious of the time. So yeah, these are here are our useful links, our homepage, blog posts, the webinars, the tutorials. We've of course got our newly launched website, which was launched I think back in the early part of June. So everything's been updated, and you can find everything in the usual places there, including our library of blog posts and webinars. I don't have anything further to add, Jin, unless there's any last-minute questions. Then we'll wrap things up there, I think.
Yeah, at the moment, I do not have any further questions.
All right, in that case, it just leaves me to say thank you for joining us today, and speak to you in a couple of weeks when we'll be talking about the remote control.
Thank you everyone for attending, and if you have any further questions, please go to Dux-Soup website, and we have a support link where you can email us or go to live chat, and we will be very happy to answer any questions which I couldn't cover or didn't have time to cover today. So thank you very much, and see you next time.